My wife and I had been talking about this cruise for almost 2 years. Every time something came up, a car repair, a medical bill, one of the kids needing something, we'd put it off again. So when we finally booked it, actually paid the deposit, and put it on the calendar, it felt like something we'd genuinely earned. 14 days, the Caribbean. Just the two of us, for the first time in longer than I can remember. We've been married for 31 years. Carol is the kind of person who plans everything. She had a packing list 3 weeks before we left. She knew the name of every port we were stopping at and what we were going to do at each one. I'm more of a go-with-the-flow type, which has always balanced us out pretty well. We boarded the ship on a Thursday afternoon, and by Thursday evening, we were sitting on our cabin balcony, watching the coastline disappear behind us, sharing a bottle of wine we'd brought from home. It was perfect. It was exactly what we'd been waiting for. The first night I woke up at some point and reached over to Carol's side of the bed out of habit. She wasn't there. I figured she'd gotten up to use the bathroom. I rolled over and closed my eyes. I don't know what made me open them again. I hadn't heard anything, but something pulled me awake, and when I opened my eyes, she was right there, kneeling on the floor next to my side of the bed, with her face about 8 inches from mine. Her eyes were wide open, completely fixed on me, and she was breathing in these slow, deep pulls that I could feel on my face. I don't scare easy. I'm a veteran. I've been in situations that would make most people fall apart, but I want to be honest with you. What I felt in that moment was pure, uncomplicated fear. I scrambled backward across the bed so fast, I nearly went off the other side. "Carol," I said. I said her name twice, maybe 3 times. She just stayed there, kneeling, staring at the spot where my face had been. Then, gradually, her breathing slowed. She stood up. She walked around the foot of the bed to the other side, got back in, and pulled the covers up like nothing had happened. She was asleep within 2 minutes. I laid there until the sun came up. I didn't sleep another minute. In the morning, I asked her about it. She looked at me like I was describing something that happened to someone else entirely. She said she remembered getting up to use the bathroom and coming back to bed. That was it. She was completely convinced I'd had a bad dream and genuinely couldn't understand why I was so shaken up. I knew what I had seen. That wasn't a dream. We ordered breakfast to the cabin because Carol said she had a headache. She ordered a full meal, more food than I'd seen her eat at one sitting in years. When it arrived, she lifted the lid off her tray and immediately pushed it away from her. She said it smelled wrong. I leaned over, and it smelled like breakfast food to me, completely normal. She insisted it smelled rotten, said she could barely stand to be near it. She took one small bite of toast and spit it back out, and told me to take the whole tray out of the room. I did. I went down to the buffet and brought her back some fruit and yogurt, and she ate all of it without any problem. I didn't say much about it. I told myself she probably had a virus coming on, some kind of stomach thing. It happens on ships. People get sick. There's a reasonable explanation for everything. After breakfast, she went to take a shower while I laid down to rest. I hadn't slept. I dozed off on the bed and woke up more than an hour later. The shower was still running. I checked my phone twice because I thought I was misreading the time. I knocked on the bathroom door and got no answer. I knocked harder and called her name. Nothing. I opened the door. The bathroom wasn't steamy the way it should have been after an hour-long shower. There was no fog on the mirror. The curtain was pulled shut across the tub, and I could hear the water running behind it. I crossed the bathroom and pulled the curtain back. Carol was standing in the tub facing me, with the same wide-open eyes she'd had the night before. The water was running ice cold. I could tell from the way the air felt, and from the way her skin looked. The lower half of her body was red from the cold, not pink the way you go from heat. but a deeper, angrier red from standing under freezing water for over an hour. I called her name loudly, and she snapped out of it like someone had turned a light switch. She yelped, grabbed the curtain rod, and told me I had scared her half to death. "When did you come in here?" she said. I asked her what she meant. I asked her if she knew what had just happened. She got out of the tub and wrapped herself in a towel and told me she had no idea what I was talking about. As far as she was concerned, she had just gotten in the shower. I told her she had been in there for over an hour. She said that was impossible. We went about our day. I didn't know what else to do. She seemed fine for most of the afternoon. We walked around the ship. She had a good appetite at dinner. We sat on the balcony again that evening, and she seemed like herself. I started to wonder if I was the one losing my mind. Then we went to the pool on the upper deck after dinner, one of those large infinity pools that overlooks the ocean. There were other passengers around, a dozen people maybe, everyone relaxed and enjoying the evening. Carol waded in, and I sat on the edge with my feet in the water. She swam out toward the center, and then stopped. She went still in the water the same way she'd been still in the shower, just floating there, facing away from me, not moving. The people near her didn't seem to notice anything. I called her name from the edge. She turned around slowly. The expression on her face when she looked at me from across that pool was not one I had ever seen on her in 31 years of marriage. I can't describe it precisely, but whatever it wasn't Carol. I still have 11 days left on this ship. I don't know what to do. I've always been the type of person who takes trips alone, not because I don't have people to travel with, but because I genuinely enjoy it. There's something about being in a new place with no schedule, no one waiting on you, no plans that can't be changed. You move at your own pace. You make decisions on the fly. And sometimes, if you're not careful, those decisions can put you somewhere you really don't want to be. I was in Jamaica for 10 days. I'm retired. Been retired for a couple of years now. And after spending most of my life working the same job in the same city, I told myself I was finally going to do the things I kept putting off. Jamaica was first on the list. I stayed in a small guest house on the south side of the island, about a 10-minute walk from one of the main beaches. The first few days were exactly what I needed. The beach, the food, the music, the warmth, all of it. I was genuinely at peace for the first time in a long time. The night this happened, I had spent the evening down by the water. I grabbed some food from a little place near the beach, walked along the shore until it got dark, and then started making my way back to the guest house on foot. I always walked everywhere when I traveled. I liked seeing things at ground level. The road I was on was a main road, well traveled during the day, but by this point, it was late enough that most of the activity had died down. Not empty, but quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own footsteps. That's when I saw him. He was walking toward me from the opposite direction, and even from a distance, something about him made me pay attention. He was carrying a white plastic bucket in one hand, one of those big 5-gallon kinds. I could see the tops of plants sticking out of it as he got closer. Green stems, leaves, the kind of cuttings you'd collect from a garden. The other hand was resting near his hip, and hanging from his belt in a cloth sheath was a machete. Now, I want to be fair. In a lot of parts of the world, a machete is just a tool. Farmers use them. Groundskeepers use them. It doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. I told myself that as he stopped in front of me and introduced himself. "Evening," he said. He had an easy smile, relaxed, like we were two neighbors running into each other. He told me his name, said he'd been out collecting plants, which explained the bucket. He asked me if I had any food on me, said he hadn't eaten much that day. I told him I didn't have food, but I did have something else. The night before, some locals on the beach had offered to sell me a little something, and I'd bought it. I'm not proud of that, and I'm not going to dress it up. but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen. I offered to share it with him. His face changed in a way that I read as friendly. "Come," he said, "follow me." And here's the part I've thought about many times since then. That was the moment. Right there. I could have said no, wished him a good night, and kept walking. Everything about what he was asking made no particular sense. I didn't know this man. It was late. He had a machete, and he was asking me to go somewhere with him. But he didn't seem threatening. He seemed like a man with a bucket of plants who wanted some company. So I followed him. He led me off the main road and across an empty lot beside a low concrete building. The lot was dark, overgrown at the edges, and I had to watch where I was stepping. We crossed to the back of the lot, where a narrow alley ran along the rear of the building. Narrower than I expected. Darker too, once we were fully in it. There was a man sleeping on a low wall, about halfway down the alley. He was on his side with one arm under his head, completely out. A few cars were parked further in, old ones, sitting at angles that suggested they hadn't moved in years. The alley went back, maybe 40 feet, and then hit a solid concrete wall. A dead end. I stopped walking for just a second. Not long enough that he noticed, I think, but long enough for my brain to catch up with what my eyes were already telling me. I was in a dead-end alley. One way in, one way out. A man I didn't know was ahead of me with a machete on his hip. Another man was behind me, asleep, but still there, and I had just willingly walked off the main road. My mind started running the numbers on that, and the answer it kept coming back to wasn't a comfortable one. He knocked on a door at the end of the alley, and then opened it without waiting. He was gone for just a moment, and I stood there in the dark, not moving, my eyes going from the door to the sleeping man, to the single opening back out to the lot. He came back out carrying 2 plastic chairs, set them down in the alley, and settled into one like we were sitting on a front porch somewhere. He nodded at the other chair. "Sit," he said. I sat. Now that I was still, I could see that there was a garden along the alley walls. Small and hidden, built into the edges of the concrete. Plants in containers, growing in gaps between the slabs. Green things creeping up the wall in spots. He'd been collecting cuttings in that bucket and bringing them back here, tending this small secret garden in a dead-end alley behind a building. I don't know why that detail made me feel slightly better. Maybe because it was so specific, so ordinary. A man with a garden. We shared what I had. He took the first pull, held it, and then coughed hard. "Where you get this?" he said, shaking his head. "This is terrible. You let these boys take your money for this?" I told him I got it from some kids on the beach the night before. He looked at it like it had personally offended him. "These kids, they see you tourists coming. They sell you anything." He handed it back. "I wouldn't give this to a goat." I laughed. Genuinely laughed. And for a few minutes it felt almost normal. The two of us sitting in this hidden alley, while he talked about his garden, and I tried to figure out which plants were which. He knew what he was talking about. He had clearly been doing this a long time, but the machete was still on his belt. And then he asked me something that changed the feeling of the whole conversation. "You carrying much money on you tonight?" He asked it the same way you'd ask someone what time it was. Easy. Casual. No shift in his expression. No change in his tone. I looked at him. "Not much," I said. He nodded slowly. Didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked at the plant in his hand, like he was thinking something over. "Good," he said finally. "You shouldn't walk around at night with a lot on you. Some people out here, they don't have my manners." I've turned that sentence over in my head more times than I can count. I still don't know exactly what he meant by it, whether he was warning me about other people, whether he was telling me something about himself, whether the machete and the alley and the question about money were all connected, or whether I was sitting next to a man who tended a garden and gave reasonable safety advice to strangers? I'll never know. I said goodnight not long after that, and he walked me back to the lot without any trouble, shook my hand at the road, watched me go. I walked the rest of the way to the guest house faster than I'd walked anywhere in years. I've always been someone who travels light, not just in terms of luggage, but in terms of expectations. I don't plan too far ahead. I book the basics and figure the rest out when I get there. For the most part, that approach has served me well. It's how I've managed to see places most people only read about, but it's also how I ended up locked inside a taxi in Central America with a man who had decided the night was going to go a very different way than I had planned. This was about 6 years ago. I was spending 3 weeks traveling through Costa Rica and Nicaragua. I'm a veteran, retired now, and after years of structure and routine, I had developed a real taste for moving around on my own terms. I'd been in a small city on the Pacific coast of Nicaragua for a few days, staying at a hostel near the center of town, and I had gotten comfortable with the area, maybe too comfortable. On this particular evening, I had walked further than I intended. I'd been exploring a neighborhood about 1.5 miles from the hostel, looking at a market that someone at the hostel had recommended. By the time I realized how late it was getting, the streets had changed. Not dramatically, not in a way I could point to specifically, but the comfortable daytime energy had settled into something quieter and a little harder to read. The market was closing up. The foot traffic had thinned out. I decided it was time to get back. I flagged down a taxi at the corner. The driver was a heavy-set man, maybe mid-40s, with a baseball cap pulled low and a small wooden cross hanging from the rearview mirror. He looked completely ordinary. I told him where I needed to go. We agreed on a fare, and I got in the back seat. The whole thing took maybe 45 seconds. Quick, routine, nothing to think about. We drove for a few minutes in the right direction. I recognized a few of the streets. I was watching the city go by through the window, already thinking about what I was going to eat when I got back. And then the car slowed down and stopped about 2 blocks from the hostel. I reached for the door handle. The locks clicked down on all 4 doors simultaneously. I sat there for a second, not entirely sure what had just happened. I pulled the handle. Nothing. The door didn't move. The driver turned around in his seat slowly and looked at me in a way that I can only describe as deliberate, like he had done this before and knew exactly how it was going to go. "You misunderstood the fare," he said. His English was careful and precise. He didn't raise his voice. He told me I owed him $100. I want to be clear about something. We had agreed on a fare before I got in the car. We had both said the number out loud. There was no misunderstanding. What was happening right now had nothing to do with a misunderstanding. I told him what we had agreed on. Calmly. I kept my voice even because I could feel the situation clearly enough to know that getting loud in a locked vehicle with a stranger was not the move. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. 100. I tried the door again, still locked. I tried the other door. Same result. I leaned forward and looked at the front, at the lock controls, and he was watching me do it with that same deliberate calm. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't angry. He was just waiting. That was the part that got to me. Not the locked doors. Not even the money. It was how steady he was. Like there was no version of this conversation where he didn't get what he wanted, and he had already decided to wait as long as it took. I sat back. I took a breath. My mind was running through my options, and they were not impressive. I had my phone. But who was I going to call? I didn't have a local contact. The hostel number wasn't going to send anyone in the next 30 seconds. I couldn't get out of the car. We were on a street that looked quiet from where I was sitting, and even if I managed to draw attention, I didn't know how that would go. I looked at the cross hanging from the mirror for a moment. Then I looked at him. "I'm going to give you what we agreed," I said. "That's what I have." I took the agreed amount out of my wallet and held it up where he could see it. I made sure he could also see that the wallet didn't have much else in it. This was true, actually. I'd learned years ago not to carry more than I needed when I was out exploring. Most of my cash was back at the hostel. He looked at the money. He looked at the wallet. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then something shifted. I don't know exactly what it was. Maybe the wallet. Maybe something in my face. Maybe he just made a calculation and decided this wasn't worth the trouble. He reached down and hit the lock controls, and all 4 doors clicked open. "Go," he said. I got out. I put the agreed fare through the front window onto the passenger seat because I had said I would pay the fare, and I don't go back on that. And then I walked the 2 blocks to the hostel without looking back. Not because I wasn't scared, because turning around felt like the wrong move. I told the guy at the hostel desk what had happened. He didn't look surprised. He told me there were a few drivers who worked that neighborhood who were known for it, usually targeting travelers who were alone, usually at night. He said most people just paid whatever was asked to get out of the car. I asked him why the hostel didn't warn guests about it. He shrugged and said they tried to, but people don't always listen. I thought about that for a while that night, lying in my bunk listening to the ceiling fan turn. I thought about how fast it had all happened. I had been flagging down that taxi within 30 seconds of deciding to go home. 45 seconds after that, I was in the back seat. 2 minutes later, the doors were locked. The whole thing moved so quickly that there was barely a moment to think before I was already inside it. I finished my trip without any other incidents. Nicaragua is genuinely beautiful, and I'd go back. But I haven't taken an unmarked taxi alone at night since then. I rent through the hostel now, or I walk if the distance is reasonable, or I just wait until morning. What I still don't know is what would have happened if I hadn't had a mostly empty wallet, whether the night would have ended the same way. I'd rather not find out.